Hey guys, and welcome to the second episode of my Nikke Goddess of Victory training series. In this episode, we will take a closer look at the optimal ways for building your team. I will go over all the important details that you need to consider to help you build the best team possible for your account. As always, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and let's get started. To make things easier, I divided Nikke's characters roster into 3 groups. First, we have the DPS characters, or the main damage dealers. These are the characters that put out the most damage for their team, be it with their normal attacks or skills. In the second group, we have the support characters. These are the ones that have skills that will directly benefit the other characters in your team. So this group includes your healers, shielders, and buffing characters. And in the third group, we have the utility units. These characters are the ones that have skills which directly apply different status effects on your enemies. So you are looking at the ones that can shred enemy defense, apply poison, and can taunt or stun enemies. It's important to know what a character's role is so that you don't overstack or miss out on any useful role for your team. Each character has different skills, but how does a character's skill work? When I say skill, I'm not talking about the burst skill each character gets when you fill up the burst meter. In Nikke, each character comes with 2 skills apart from their burst skill. A character's skill has conditions that will activate it. For example, Pepper's skill 1 activates when her last bullet hits the target. She then restores health for the ally with the lowest HP. Different characters have different conditions to activate their skills, so it's important to take a second and read the skill descriptions on each character you get so you can maximize their efficiency and utility. On top of a character's role, another thing we have to take into account is their burst type. If you want to know more about this, you can go check out the previous episode where I go over everything you need to know about the game's combat system. With that said, you need to consider a character's burst type since you won't be able to reach the full burst mode if you don't have one character for each burst type in your team. Now that we know all of this, for us to make an optimal team, we have to follow the 2 criteria. Our team should have 1 character for each of the 3 burst types, and optimally, we should have a good balance of damage dealers and supports or utility. You can get creative with the characters you have, but from what I have noticed from Nikke's character roster, most of the top tier DPS characters in Nikke are classified as burst type 3. You're looking at characters like Drake, Private, Alice, and Guillotine. But I would say that you should prioritize your team's burst type early into the game. You can go for a team that has 2 burst type 1 characters, 1 burst type 2, and 2 more characters that have burst type 3. This will give you a good balance between damage and utility. You can include 1 DPS and 1 support for burst type 1, another support or utility for burst type 2, and then 2 DPS characters that are burst type 3. You can also go for a 1-1-3 split, meaning you'll have a support or utility for your burst type 1 and 2, then you'll have the rest of your 3 members be burst type 3 DPS characters. I can confidently say that DPS is your priority in Nikke. The stages in the game have a time limit, so having more damage means you are more likely to complete the stage before the time runs out. And based on my experience in the CBT, I was able to progress significantly with just 2 support units max, and the units I used were not even the best supports in the game. For the next part of this video, I will rate the SR characters as well as the guaranteed units we will have in the game. I decided to only rank the SR characters in this video because realistically, everyone, especially free-to-play players, will mostly be using SR units for the majority of their teams. SR characters will be in your teams for a while because you are more likely to get copies of them, which means SR characters will have the highest level caps in your account, especially early on. But before I start ranking the SR units, I will first go over the guaranteed SSR unit, which is Diesel. You will be able to get Diesel along with other rewards if you pre-register for the game, so make sure you go ahead and do that if you haven't done so already. So Diesel, I'm sad to say that she is just an average SSR unit, which is unfortunate because I personally like her design, and she is also played by my favorite voice actor. I say that she's average because her skills are not that good compared to other SSR skills. Her first skill increases defense and heals for a small amount, but it only activates during full burst mode, which means you don't have much uptime on it. So overall, I will have to put her on B tier. Now moving on to the SR characters. I will be ranking them by utility, how well they perform in different teams, and how far can they theoretically take you in the game when you get an additional 2 copies of them. Not all of the SR units are good, so this tier list will give you an idea on who to use, which ones are viable, and which ones to avoid. First up, we have Anise. She is a burst type 2 rocket launcher unit, and has a 20-second cooldown on her burst skill, which is really good. Her skills increase the team's survivability by increasing their defense by a significant amount and at the same time shredding the enemy's defense. She is a solid unit for being just an SR, so I will have to put her on A tier. Next up we have Belorta. She is also a burst type 2 unit who uses a rocket launcher, but the downside about Belorta is that she is leaning more towards the DPS role but doesn't quite have enough damage to justify it. And she's also filling up the burst type 2 slot in your team, so I really think Anise is a better option overall, and because of that, I will have to put her on C tier. Next, we have Delta. She is a burst type 2 sniper unit, and the biggest problem about her kit is that she has a 40-second cooldown on her burst skill. Her burst skill sends out a decoy that taunts enemies for 10 seconds, which is good on paper, but the decoy's HP scales with her HP, and Delta has one of the lowest HP pools in the game. So with that said, I'm putting her on C tier. For the next one, we have Ether. She is a burst type 1 shotgun unit. Her skills are very lackluster and she has a 40-second cooldown on her burst skill. So there's really not much to say about her. Just like Delta, I will have to put her on C tier. Next up, we have Mika. She is basically a worse version of Anise that fills the burst type 1 slot. Her normal attack doesn't have a charged version, and she has the same skill as Anise, just with lower values, and because of that, I'm putting her on C tier. Next, we have Mihara. She is a burst type 2 assault rifle user. Her skills will increase your crit rate and crit damage, and she only has a 20-second cooldown on her burst skill, so I can really see her being viable, especially early on. Plus, she has other big reasons for being a good character, so I'm putting her on B tier. Next, we have N102. She is a burst type 1 rocket launcher unit. Her skills are not that great, and the next character in this tier list will be a better option for your burst type 1 slot. With that said, I'm also putting her on C tier. Next, we have Neon. She's a burst type 1 shotgun unit, and her skills basically revolve around giving your team significantly more crit rate. And her burst skill increases the ammo capacity for the other shotgun users in your team. So let's say you have Drake in your team. Her value skyrockets in that situation, but even outside of that, she is still a very useful character, so because of that, I'm putting her on A tier. And last but definitely not least, we have Rappi. She is by far the best SR unit in the game. She has a lot of attack increasing abilities, and the fact that she is the only burst type 3 SR unit in the game means that you will most likely need to have her in your team. Her burst skill has a high damage scaling, which makes up for the 40-second cooldown. And you don't really need to worry about burst type 3 characters having a long cooldown, since it will most likely be off cooldown after you cycle through the other burst meters. So yeah, that is my SR tier list for Nikke. I would say that characters on S and A tier will definitely be of use, especially when you get 2 more copies of them. The ones on the lower tiers are easily replaceable by other units who fulfill the same role. Overall, I hope you found this video useful, and if you haven't done so already, go ahead and check out the previous episode where I go over the combat system in Nikke Goddess of Victory. And as always, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.